Welcome to this session wherein we're going to talk about how you can master Jetpack Compose. So, what is Jetpack Compose? Any idea, guys? Already there in the waiting room? Yeah. So, what I'll do is let me explain you this new framework which came out like around 2021. Let's say when it comes to traditional app development, we used to use something called as an XML. So here is my traditional approach, which is also known as XML. Then on the right side, I'll put a declarative approach in which the Android team introduce Compose. Now, when it comes to any kind of a professionally developed app, what do you guys notice? It comes along with a common button design. All the text would be similar, whether it would be bold, whether it would be normal text, and the theme, all the color combination. So, all of that used to happen on the traditional approach with XML. Now, when it comes to Android, which is now the latest one, we are going to move towards Compose. Now, what I'll try and do is over here, first I'll explain you what is Jetpack Compose, when you should migrate your project to Compose, what are the best coding practices when you're trying to move to Compose, libraries that follow the state management in case of Compose, and the importance of learning the architecture. Now, I would want you to explore the Coding X app by Programming Hub. So if you would see this Coding X app, we already have around 5 lakh people who have downloaded the app, and this is the average rating 4.9 stars. We have really worked hard into creating this app, and we have put a lot of content that could actually be very useful to you guys. So try to download this app. You can learn about programming by listening to simple audio instructions and following through the sequences. We have developed this app from the very scratch, and it will help you to understand programming from the scratch. Irrespective of whatever level you are, you can surely check out our app. I'm going to leave the app description even in the description box below for this entire YouTube live. Now, without wasting any time, let's get back to the topic. And over here, I'm just not going to do the talk. I'm going to write code and explain to you. So what's Compose? Here, now let me just move to my screen share. Now I'll go to my entire screen share, and this is where my Android Studio is. Okay, so if you would notice, in Android Studio, I already have here my app to be running, which says Hello Android. Well, that this is the basic app which you could be getting. The moment you click on the next on the project and create an app, that's the project which you will be getting, and that is exactly where we're going to start. Exactly what I said. We're going to have mastery into this small class. Let's see whether we are able to achieve our goal or not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, follow a good practice, and create a directory called as home. Now inside this home directory is going to be where my home screen will be lying. So I'll put over here home screen. So what is this class? This is just the regular Kotlin class. Now I'm going to write a function display home content, and inside this I'm going to mention @composable. So what is this @composable, guys? It is the way of telling your Kotlin compiler that this is a code which will be a visual or the UI code. So rather than the traditional approach where you have to create a separate XML file, then bind it to the fragment or the activity, over here there is no such concept. And let me show you how beautifully it works. So I'll create one design first and then stick to that one. So here, let's say we have this as a screen. It will say welcome to Compose, and below this welcome to Compose there would be two buttons. One, increment, then a number will be getting displayed on the center, and a decrement on which, if you have already guessed, when you're trying to click on this left hand side button, it's going to increment the count and show it on the screen. Left hand side, right hand side button, if you press, it would decrement the count and show it on the screen. That's the very simple app we are going to try and understand with Compose for the initial part. Now, if you are coming from already an app development background, let me just tell you from the very beginning that we are going to implement an entire state flow and a view model, that too in our session today. Stick around and you'll ensure that, and you will learn about all the view model hacks within one particular class. So that's my box. What I'll do is, on the entire screen, I'm going to first use this modifier. So what's a modifier? It kind of is a template which tells me that what is the screen size we're looking for, and I'll say from the topmost to the bottommost pixel I want to use the entire screen. Now here what do we do? What we do is just put dot align, and let me not do this alignment at all. So next what I'll try and do is add a text. Welcome to Programming Hub. And now what I want to do is I want to get you introduced to the name parameters. So do you notice there is this attribute text? So I take this, paste it, slightly increase the font size, let's say to 28 SP, and I'll change the color to colors dot white. So what will happen? A white color text shall be appearing. Now let's try and see whether we can align this entire content to the center of the screen or not. Now, as object-oriented programming goes, this is a function which I've kept it inside this class. So rather than now this greeting function, I'm going to call my home screen class, and inside this I'm going to display the home content. As I run my code, I should be able to see my very simple code for displaying this text on the app. So let me try. While the code compilation is in progress, I'm going to check in the chat box if any of you have got a question to ask to me. Well, not yet. Now, over here, it says the build was successful, and that's my app. Welcome to Programming Hub. Now, what I would want to do is slightly below the app, that is over here, right below the text, I'm going to have my buttons. So let me put a column, and below the column, we'll put a row. So what is a row? If you would see this design that we created, this increment button, center text followed by decrement. They are one aligned adjacent to other. So what I'll try and do is over here, first add a row in which there would be a button. I'll do control click and I'll say the on click function. And inside this, I'll put the caption on the button increment. So let's see how does this one button appear. In this way, you'll also understand what do I mean by the column and what do I mean by the row. So if I would run my app, do you notice this two, they came onto the center and they are one below the another? That's a column. It represents the y-axis in case of mathematics. What I would now want is the column to have an alignment. So here I'll do control space, and do you notice that it has got a vertical arrangement and horizontal alignment. So I'll take this horizontal alignment and I'll take this center horizontally. So over here I'll make my entire column fill the maximum width. Let's see what happens. If I would now run the app, you got to see this button which was left aligned now came to the center. If you're wondering why the text is not in the center, is because we did not align the text to the center. That is the text align property. So I'll put over here something called as text align, in which I can set up text align dot center, and you'll know you'll notice if I would run my code, this hub is going to come to the center. Pretty much clean, correct? Now let's continue with the design that we were looking for. Increment followed by 0 and then the decrement. So in this case, what I'll try and do is here, after the button is being displayed, I want to display a text, and the initial value on the text is going to be 0. I will ensure that the text is huge enough for us to see. So I'll put a font size of 30, and then I'll make the color as white. Next, I would also give some kind of a spacing. So look over here, I can apply this modifier spacing, and on the left side, I would add something called as a padding, and I'll mention that the start padding has to be 20 dp. It's important to know that whenever you're trying to deal with text, it is going to be SP, and whenever you're trying to do with any kind of a spacing, it's going to be dp. Okay, let's see if I would now just put even the end as 20 dp and then copy and paste this button once again. So if you remember the design, on the center that was the text, Left hand side, it was the increment button. Right hand side, it was a decrement button. And on the subsequent run, you will be able to see this into the app. So check this thing out. It's been present. If you want to increase the gap between these two elements, look over here. After the text, we had this row. So I'll now go to the row, mention the modifier as padding on all sides of 20 dp. Now you don't on the subsequent run, you will not see this to stick to each other, and they would be spaced out. Yeah. What I'll now show to you is how we can try and add this functionality for increment and decrement. In order to do so, let me introduce to you on why Jetpack Compose got so popular. Let's go to the PPT. So here, what is Jetpack Compose? Like I demonstrated to you, it's a UI or a declarative way of writing code in Android. Why is it important? Did you notice how quickly we made this entire screen? We were able to think across what is going to come next and write the code exactly in that declarative format. That is the beauty. You are able to write code faster, which ultimately means your apps can get produced faster. And this entire thing, even though I was explaining you, we hardly took around 15 minutes to display it onto our app. That is the speed I'm talking about. So this is Jetpack Compose. When should you migrate your project to Compose? Now, if your time allows, it should be immediate. What are the different coding practices? Yeah, I'm going to tell you all of that. Libraries and the importance. Now, point number one is, should you even consider migrating to Compose? If possible, yes. Yes, because now I'm not just saying blindly this yes. I myself in my professional career have used Compose, and trust me, it helps you to write even a cleaner code. But you might argue that already your app is built on an XML and you have a huge community or a huge user base that already is live on production. If you try to migrate your code onto Compose, it might take you weeks and even in some case months. Will the company ready to finance you or ready to wait for that time period for the features to get released? The answer would be obvious no. So in this case, what you should try and do is try to develop all the new features into your app into Compose. So the answer is, if you have an XML based app, I have already worked with apps which are like XML, partially XML and partially Compose, and one which is all Compose. And trust me, the app which was in all Compose faced relatively lesser bugs compared to all the others. Now, what is in case that I support Compose so very much? Let's say when you're trying to develop the app, you would be falling into a pit wherein you should be having that learning curve and you would be able to grasp on this. So, helping to migrate your code into Compose might take longer, but writing a functionality which you're already going to develop in XML, why not go to Compose? In this way, your learning curve will be there. You would be learning about Android app development, that too with the latest things, and you will be even compatible to put an XML, that is this Android View XML, into your Compose, and it is totally interoperable just because it's Kotlin and it is like 100% compatible with each other. So why should be Compose be preferred? Because once you create a component, you can reuse it. So what I'll try and do is, in this case, turn one of the buttons to be purple color. Let's see, the over here we mention modifier background and color dot, or in fact I can just use this purple 40. So what is purple 40? This is already present in the color theme and I'll reuse this color. So let's see how does this thing look like. I'm going to run my code and show it to you. Now this background color, it doesn't look good because it has got sharp edges. So what I'll try and do is over here put a clip as circle shape, and then I'll also put a padding of, let's say, 10 dp. Yeah. Now you might see that the edges are still there. That's because I did not apply any kind of a border. So I can apply this rectangle shape border and do all of these customizations. But let me restrict myself and keep this as this particular button. And now let's say we want to use this button. So what I'll try and do, I'll write over here a Kotlin file which says custom button. Now I'm going to write a function custom button, mark this as @composable and paste it. So what did you notice? I implemented a custom button, correct? Now over here, just see, I'll try to put custom button, and over here also custom button. If I would now run the app, you are going to see the button exactly in the same way like you had seen it previously. Let me show it to you. Now you might argue that the text on the button and even the functionality for the click is common. How do I differentiate it? Well, now let me show you how we can set up a unit callback like on button click, and I'll put this as something called as a unit followed by button caption, which is going to be a string. Now the button caption is going to ensure that this is the text that appears on the button. Next, whenever the button is going to get clicked, I'm going to call this on button click. So if you would notice, if I go back here, do you notice now it is asking me to write the code for button caption? I'll put this as increment. Next, on button click. And what I'll do is I'm going to create a log like private val tag. I'll put this as home screen and then use this tag in my logcat. So log.d increment button was pressed, and over here I'll put button caption decrement on button click, decrement button was pressed. So we have now two buttons and the button press. Let me now run my code and show it to you that they both are going to work perfectly well. I'll go to the logcat, put over here a filter as home screen. Now when I click on this, yeah, it says increment button was pressed. Now let me just filter it on home screen, and it says now the decrement button was pressed. So what do you understand? This button press and this customization we are able to achieve with the help of composables. Wasn't that easy, guys? Let me take some questions from you. Okay, now I'll again share my screen and go to the diagram that we were working upon. So this question is already answered. So if you do all of the migration in one shot, so what should be the correct way to go forward? Now, the correct way is don't touch the view models or don't touch your entire business logic. Only you're going to touch the UI elements. Let me show you how now you should be adding the UI elements. So what I'll do is over here, when we were adding this home content, I'll create a counter variable. I'll put a remember, mention mutable state of 0. What is 0? With the help of 0, it understands that it is an integer mutable. So now I'll go to my app. Over here, I'll put counter dot value plus plus. Now instead of this being hard coded to 0, I'll display the actual count on my counter, and because it's a decrement button, I'll put this value minus minus. If I would now try to run the app, you would be seeing like over here, increment and the number value increases, decrement and the number value decreases. So that's my entire counter app. What I'll now do is onto this add view models. In order to have this process quick being done, you would notice that it's in the app. I already have added this life cycle for view model and the app life cycle for the compose. Next, let's try and see how does this thing work. What I'll do is I'll go onto my app. Over here, imagine that you're trying to get data from a server. So it would have a loading, right? So here we are going to display a loading like a loader like this and on the center of the screen. And once you have the data, so this is the request. And once we are going to receive the data, we're going to have a response from the server. And over here, we are going to hard code for now because we're going to test it out. Data received from server. So like I was saying in the beginning, even if you guys are going to be from Android background and have this experience of using APIs in your app, still this particular tutorial live session is going to be useful to you guys. What I'll do is, into the home screen, I'll create a model. That's exactly how you even would use start the app development for API consumption with the help of a model. So here I'll try to keep like uh, main UI state. So I'll erase this and put data class main UI state as a boolean, and I'll say yes, initially the loading sign is going to be there. Now once the loading is over, we'll create a data received variable which is initially going to be empty. Now inside this home, I'll try to create a main view model. So this would be extending the view model. I'll create the tag variable, and then we are going to have a function hit server to load data. Now, as we are not actually going to get details from the server and simulate it over here, I'm going to do it as I'm doing professionally in my apps. So we will have a state flow. So I'll mention this as mutable state flow and mention the state. Next is going to be the val state flow, in which I'll mention as state flow. So here, as we are going to go to the server, I'll put this copy, wherein let me keep this as variable, and I'll mention yes, the loading is going to be true, and yeah, now the error went away. So let me just take a look onto it. And I forgot to mention a dot value here. So here I'll put a delay of, let's say, 3 seconds, And then once the loading is complete, I'll set this variable to false and say we have received data from server, a simple hard-coded text. Now you see over here there is this arrow which indicates that it should have been a coroutine. Hence I'll put view model scope and launch, and I'll put this entire code inside this. So let me now show you how, with the help of Compose, I'm going to load this. And here I'm going to introduce to you guys to the concept of side effects. So what is the side effect? Now I want to load this data on the server, from the server. So imagine an Amazon app. The moment you open the app, it goes to the Amazon server and fetches the product. So here we have our entire app. So let's say now I'll put over here my view model, then onto the main activity. Here is my variable for the view model, and this is my initialization for the view model. Let me take the input. Now I'll pass the variable for view model as an object into my display home content, and here we are going to UI state by view model collect as state with life cycle, and let me take the import. So what will now happen, guys? Here if the state is loading, then we are going to display a loader like animation. So I'll take this entire column, put it inside else, and inside this I'm going to just keep one circular progress indicator. So let me show you how does this thing work. If you would remember, I already have kept the default variable for loading to be true, and hence it should show me that circular loading icon throughout in my app. That's how it looks like. Now, what I'll try and do, as I was saying, with the help of side effect. So here is something called as a side effect. I'll mention key as true. And then using my view model, I'll call hit server to load data. Now, if you would see with life cycle, it means if the activity is going to get recreated, my code should be running once again and then getting the details from the server. So, did you notice here for 3 seconds the loading animation got showed and then the data got received? If not, let me run my code once again and show it to you. So for 3 seconds, the loader shall be visible and then we get this data. How? Because that is exactly the code we wrote here, adding a delay and then displaying this data. So next, what we're going to try and do is into my home screen, this launch effect. Now if I try to rotate the screen, no, it's going to redo the things. Let me prove it to you. So here I am on my app and I'll try to rotate the phone. Did you notice? It again showed up the loading. So what do we understand? If we are rotating, the activity is recreated, correct? That's what is making the app to load up again. In this case, so launch effect, we understand that it would be running once when the app is going to get created. But what is the disadvantage? If you are rotating and if you already have the data from the server, that would not be changing, correct? So why you should be loading the data once again? That's one API call more, which is not required to be done. So let me show you a better way. So this is the view model. In view model, we have something called as an init, and I'll hit this function. I'll run my code, and you'll notice now the loading get symbol is getting displayed, and then welcome to programming hub shows up. So what we are trying to do, exactly the same thing, only I have moved this function API call from my UI into the init state. That's fairly simple, correct? Well, let me tell you, there is one more way. Imagine that you want to call this API again after 15 seconds. In this case, what I'm going to show to you is here I'm going to do on start and call my function. Later, I'll put state in view model scope, comma, file subscribed for 5000 seconds, and then I'll mention the initial value, that is this. So what you're going to see, I'll remove this and put over here mutable state flow of main UI state. My bad, I had to make this as just a state flow. So let's try and see if this works now also. I'll try to run my code and show you the app running. Like you notice, the app loading symbol shows up and then the data comes up. So in this case, what good practice we have kept, as we are doing it on start, that is over here, this function is going to get triggered only when you are having a you're not having the data into your app and you call it. Now if I try to rotate my phone, just see the difference. It's straight away rotated without going to the server and fetching the data again. And I can try and do this multiple times. Hence, this one is usually the best way or the best approach to try to load the data. Next, what I'm going to do is quickly show you how you can integrate even permissions. In order to do so, right below where my row is ending, I'll put a button. Why not use my custom button? I'll put the button caption as ask multiple permissions, and on button click we are going to ask this permission. So let me show you how we can do this. What I'll now do is ask a bunch of permissions. In this case, I have already kept the permissions ready, and that is over here. This is the multiple permissions we are going to ask. I'll copy this and paste it here. I'll put a round bracket over here, also round bracket, and take the appropriate import. Now, when I just take this, it tells me to opt in for the permissions API, and I'll say yes. So here we have multiple permissions. Now, what I have done in my XML, that is manifest, I have written a bunch of permissions that we can ask onto the app. Here is the entire list, and let me show you how simply we can do it. So here is my multiple permission, launch, launch multiple permission request, and I'll then run the app. So here we are going to get a button which will help us to ask multiple permissions. Let's check it out. Let me uninstall the app so that I can show you from the very beginning. Yeah, so imagine this to be the first time user that is going to download our app and start using this permissions. So it says install successful. We have our app to be loading. I'll click on ask multiple permission and you see this. Do you think even we spent 5 minutes on writing it? That is the beauty. So with Compose, you can actually make the things very swift. Now, which makes me come to when migrating, how to think from a company's perspective. And I have answered you very clearly that making your app development to reach to your audience faster is the best way to make your companies think to migrate to Compose. Now, keeping good things in your mind is very, very important, like creating common composables. If you would notice, in during the session, I wrote this custom button and I've used it at 3 places in my app. I do agree that the custom button looks kind of ugly, but right now I'm not bothered about the design and I'm here to teach to you concepts. This now is an important thing as every time I would do anything to my app, it's going to reflect throughout. Let me show it to you. If I change the color of my text to white, you'll notice that this black color text, wherever it is going to appear, is going to turn to white. And that's going to be purely because of a common composable. Look at now they all are white. So when you have to learn Compose, there is going to be a faster development cycle, and then once the learning curve is complete, you'll make it uh, better apps. So it's like either you play the game of learning Compose or you surely lose. So in order to stay in the battle and learn effectively, I highly recommend you to download this Coding X app. The Coding X app has got PHP, Go, Kotlin, and many more technologies with very easy explanations onto them. You'll surely enjoy all the code that will be developed from scratch while you're learning in this app. I recommend you to download this app, which is of course free, and browse through the courses and check by yourself. You should surely see the difference. Link will be in the description box below. See you till the next YouTube live session. Goodbye.